Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the ATA meeting for September. My name is Alexander Fuller. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. Everyone is currently on mute. I do encourage everyone to utilize the questions function of GoToWebinar and ask questions throughout the presentation. There is going to be a time at the end, hopefully, to answer any remaining questions. Um, this webinar is going to be recorded, and the slides and recording is going to be available on our help desk. We will send out an email once that becomes available. Okay, so what's on the agenda for today is that we're going to talk through the last iteration of data quality, which was Q2 of 2025. We're going to talk through the 2026 data standards updates and just information that you need to know going forward. We're going to go through HMIS user training, agency participation agreements, and then upcoming dates to look forward to. And then hopefully if there's time at the end, we can answer any questions. Okay, to get us started with data quality for Q2 of 2025. So this iteration of data quality did conclude on September 26th. So we do want to thank everyone that did participate in submitting and reviewing your data for this time period or this iteration. Results should be posted no later than next Monday. And all of the data quality results can always be found in our results article on the help desk. So no matter the iteration, you can always go to this article and find the link to the appropriate results. One thing to note is that if you have not submitted your reports as of yet, I do recommend that you submit them immediately today so that they can be included. One thing to note is that if you do submit them after the 26th, there is a chance that they're not going to be included in the initial results. So at some point we will rerun them with the data and it will be updated. But if you haven't submitted, don't just submit or don't not submit. We still encourage you to get those submissions in. Okay, so the next piece of data quality for this iteration was is going to be overlapping enrollments. So the overlapping enrollments reports did go out to agencies on September 22nd. The report includes clients who were enrolled in 2 or more residential bid projects on the same day during fiscal year 2024. These overlaps are flagged because they represent data inconsistencies that need to be reviewed and coordinated. So the files that we sent out are the overlaps amongst the agencies or the projects. So in most cases, you are going to have to work with other agencies to identify accurate dates. So ideally, the concern or the problem is that a client can't be in more than one place at one time. So with that thought, when you have projects such as emergency shelters and you have overlaps in them, there is a time where the client was not at one of the facilities. So this is kind of just the overall issue is that a client can't be counted in more than one bid on a single night. So to review this, agencies should kind of just review to make sure that their internal dates are accurate, such as housing movement dates, enrollment entry dates, or even exit dates, so when the client left. We do have an article on our help desk of all the ATAs for the various agencies. So you can reach out to them to kind of rectify these overlaps. If you identify that an exit date within your own project can be adjusted to correct the overlap, or the housing movement date might be incorrect, and you make those adjustments, there shouldn't be a reason for you to need to reach out. But if you believe the error is on the other end, we do strongly encourage you to reach out to kind of rectify those. So the next slide here, I just highlighted a couple of common instances that we've experienced of, concerns of why overlaps happen. So the main reason is due to over or emergency shelters clients not exiting when clients stop returning. So emergency shelter enrollment should only reflect the night the client physically stayed at the shelter. In some cases, if a client comes into an emergency shelter, let's say 3 days in a row, the expectation is that they're going to come back the fourth day. Um, and if they don't come back the fourth day and they come back the fifth day, in a lot of cases, providers will leave the client open and account for that fourth day that they truly wasn't at the project. The way that data entry should work is that your enrollment should only reflect the days that the client stayed at the shelter. So if they don't show back up for the fourth day, the exit date should be the date of the third day with the new enrollment for the fifth day when they came back to the shelter. So you're not gonna want to remove the exit date or um, have that enrollment continuous. You're gonna want to actually represent, the actual time the clients was at your physical location. Another instance is when clients might transfer from a rapid rehousing project to a permanent supportive housing project. So there is a process in place in which those transfers should happen, in which it won't cause an overlap. Um, in a lot of these cases, what happens is that either the rapid rehousing project might not have exited the client prior to the permanent supportive housing project enrolling them, or the new permanent supportive housing project might have a housing move-in date that might be um, covering the time in which they were still being served by rapid rehousing. So there is a way to do that accurately. We do have a help desk article on it. If you just search for client transfers, you should be able to see how that process works. And then the next piece would just be duplicate enrollment. So mistakes do happen, and sometimes when entering clients, you might accidentally enter them twice. Those duplicate enrollments should be reviewed so that there's only one enrollment per client, or that represents the time that the client is being served by your project. So if you ever notice duplicate enrollments, you're going to want to always clean those out. So we do have a couple of questions. Will timeliness be affected by changes to overlapping enrollments? So timeliness could be affected due to adjusting overlapping enrollments, but the overall goal with timeliness, the overlapping enrollment process is to get to a point of accurate data. So if you're correcting data to make it more accurate, then that, in my opinion, should definitely come before concerns with timeliness. And if it does come to that, you can always reach out to us and then we can kind of review that case, if that makes sense. Okay, we have another question. Clients will also leave one shelter and go to another without informing the previous shelter. That definitely happens, and I completely understand how that can complicate a workflow in terms of exiting clients out. One thing that providers could do is kind of just continuously run reports and review instances in which clients might not have shown up. And if they don't show up, you might not necessarily know the destination of where the client went. But as long as you know that the client is not at your facility, then you can at least put the exit in and then maybe go back and adjust the destination if you find out more appropriate information. But I think the key is that you want to just make sure that you're indicating the true time the client stayed in your project. Um, if there are instances where clients do kind of fall outside of kind of review, meaning that if a client is enrolled in your project and you just don't happen to notice, that's why these overlapping enrollment kind of processes where we're sending out the overlaps is really important, just so it just makes providers aware. Currently, there could be instances where visibility in the system prevents you from being able to see additional enrollments the client might have. But at this time, you just want to make sure that you're constantly reviewing to make sure that the clients that are truly in your project are reflected in the system accurately. When clients are going from wrap rehousing to PSH, the client is still in the unit and will cause some overlap. So the way that the transfer process works is that if a client is housed through wrap rehousing and have a housing moving date and they're being transferred to permanent supportive housing, the wrap rehousing project will exit the client. The permanent supportive housing project will then enroll the client and put in a housing moving date as of the date of the enrollment. So for the client, the permanent supportive housing project that's receiving the client should not have the original housing moving date from wrap rehousing. The housing moving date should be the date that the permanent supportive housing project enrolled the client, which should be after the wrap rehousing project exited the client. So in that instance, there shouldn't be a overlap in enrollment. Okay, another question. When clients are referred to another agency, are these overlapping projects a problem if the other agency hasn't put in a housing moving date yet? So a good example would be if a rapid housing project plans to transfer a client to permanent supportive housing and the permanent supportive housing project enrolls the client ahead of the rapid housing project exiting them, the permanent supportive housing project, well, in my opinion, the only reason that should happen is that the unit that the client is moving to in permanent supportive housing isn't ready yet. So in that case, then there shouldn't be a housing moving date added in the permanent supportive housing until that client actually moves into that new unit, in which that new housing moving date shouldn't overlap with what's happening with rapid housing. So at that point, rapid housing will still exit them out once they move into the new permanent supportive housing unit, and enter that new housing moving date. Okay, the new THRH process will automatically cause overlaps. We cannot exit the clients because they are exited. So THRH is a little bit different, and you shouldn't see those in the report, but if you do, just let me know, and then, well, you can kind of just ignore them, but just let me know if you do see them. But they shouldn't be included within the same agency. So if you have a TH and an RH project, you technically have two projects under the same funding. There shouldn't be an overlap between those two projects. If a client is enrolled in your TH project and also enrolled in another TH project, that is going to cause an overlap in enrollment. So PSH will have overlaps because some have not been housed. So I'm just gonna kind of assume your question is that if you have a permanent supportive housing project, and the client isn't housed yet, the housing movement date is going to be the date in which is going to indicate the client is housed. So if there's any other enrollment that, crosses that date, then it's going to cause an overlap. If it's two permanent supportive housing projects and neither project has added a housing movement date, then there's no overlap. Once one project adds a housing movement date, then that will cause an overlap, because at that point the client is being indicated as housed, in which they can't be housed in two projects. Okay, another one. We noticed that once the client enrolled into Rapid Housing Project, the other program did not exit them at the time, but did eventually exit them at a later date. So that's a perfect example in which you're going to want to reach out to the agency and have them correct the exit date. So if the exit date in the system doesn't reflect the date in which the client truly exited the project and might just represent the day in which the exit was put in, then that should be adjusted because those extra days between the client truly leaving and the exit date is what's causing the problem. Okay, so when transferring from wrap housing to wrap housing, there's an overlap while working out the transfer. How do we avoid that? So the only way that will cause an overlap is that the project that's receiving the transfer enrolls the client prior to them actually receiving services, or adding a housing moving date prior to them actually being in the unit. So if they're housed in the original Rapid housing project and transfers to another one, and they're going to a different unit, that new Rapid housing project shouldn't put a housing move-in date until they truly move in. Once they truly move in, that should also be the date in which the client is exited from Rapid housing or before. So the Rapid housing, the original project's Rapid housing exit should not be after the new project's housing moving date for the client. So yes, the housing moving date for permanent supportive housing projects indicates that the client is housed. When it comes to emergency shelters, transitional housing, just them being in the project is them, in quotes, being housed by the project for the night. When it comes to PSH, RH, the housing movement date is what determines that. Are there any questions before we move on to data standards? Okay, so for the 2026 data standards update, the first thing that we just want to highlight is that HUD has finalized the data standards as of September 29th. One thing to note is that the documentation for the data standards isn't going to be available until about 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks after the go live date. So once that does become available, we will be able to provide more context around questions and also be able to provide more documentation around a lot of things. So the HUD data standards will go into effect October 1st, which is tomorrow. In preparation of that, the system will go down offline today for all users at 8 p.m. So we did send out an email this morning to all users letting them know. So at 8 p.m. the system will go down. So try to get everything accomplished for today before that time. Tomorrow the HMIS team will send out an email just confirming the update has either been successful or if there's any concerns. So previously in previous years, there have been instances in which the data standards update didn't go as planned, and either WellSky had a bug and had to go back and reapply the update. So there are possibilities that things could not go as planned. So we will let you know what the status is tomorrow morning. And then also, in addition to the webinar that we held on the 25th for ATAs, we will be hosting a follow-up webinar for all users. This webinar will go through a lot of the questions and how they appear in HMIS. The main thing that I think this webinar is going to really focus on is the new sex field and how users are supposed to be completing it in the system. So we're going to do a demo and kind of show how that works. And then we're going to include any additional updates that we find out between now and then. We'll also include those. Okay, so we have one question, 8 p.m. CST until midnight. So yes, it's going to start at 8 p.m. We don't have a time in which it's going to finish. We hope that it should be available at midnight, but we can't be sure when it's gonna finish. But again, we'll send out an email tomorrow morning, just letting everyone know the status once we had a chance to kind of review and do a little testing. I wasn't present for the 25th meeting. Will you be able to send over the presentation? So yes, the presentation from the 25th is available in our help desk articles. So that's actually my next slide. So we do have these help desk articles that goes over the data standards overview. So pretty much everything we covered in the overview webinar on the 25th, as well as the reporting overview that specifically talks about the HUD reporting, so the APR, the CAPR, PAF, VA reports are going to be located in this article. Both articles contain the recording of the webinar as well as the slides. So you'll be able to find that there. Will this change update affect submitting match requests? I was going to submit a match request today. Should I wait to submit a match request? So to my knowledge, I don't think this has any effect on match requests, but I would specifically reach out to the CE team to confirm. So yes, this presentation will be available on our help desk, and then I will send out a link to the article as well as the slides. So next, we're going to kind of talk through the reporting timeline for the 2026 standards. One thing to highlight is that SAGE will be updated to the 2026 standards as of October 1st, which means that reports such as the APR, the ESG CAPR, and the coordinated entry APR will no longer accept files generated out of HMIS as of tomorrow or today. So if you run an APR today and you plan on submitting, you should do that today into SAGE, as SAGE is still under fiscal year 2024 and HMIS is still under fiscal year 2024. If you try to take an HMIS file today and upload it tomorrow, it's going to reject it and you're going to have to rerun the report. The PAF annual report is expected to be due in mid-December of 2025. So there's no updates to that just yet. The RIE report will use the fiscal year 2026 hashed CSV starting October 1st of 2025. So starting tomorrow, the hashed CSV will be updated for RIE. And when it comes to the VA will use the fiscal year 2024 CSV for the annual reports due October 2025 and transition to use the fiscal year 2026 for the November upload. So what that means is that if you are a project funded through VA and you're submitting your October reports, you should do that by October 17th to avoid any complications when the system updates the fiscal year 2026 for November. So if you wait until after October 17th, then it's a chance that when you run your VA export, it's going to be formatted in a way that is not going to be accepted by the repository potentially. So just to make sure that you don't run into any issues, we do recommend that you submit those sooner than later. So the next thing that we're going to kind of talk through is the DFSS reporting. Yesterday, DFSS did send out an email to delegates kind of letting them know of next steps with the DFSS quarterly reports. So kind of just to summarize that, DFSS quarterly reports are due Wednesday, October 8th, unless you received an earlier deadline that was identified for your project. DFSS is asking all providers to generate a quarterly DFSS report today to capture the gender data that will be needed to be included in the Q3 submissions. So yeah, if you're funded through DFSS and you're submitting a quarterly report that's going to be due on October 8th, DFSS recommends that you go in today and run your report so you're able to capture the gender information so that you're able to then complete the left side of the quarterly reports, which is the manual side, after October 1st. So if you want to be able to make sure that you have the data to be able to then populate the left side of your report, please run that report today. Are there any questions about the data standards or the rollout or anything that we talked about previously? Okay, we do have a question about overlapping enrollments. My client is enrolled in our program in-house, but they are a household member, not head of household. They are interested in becoming a head of household. Okay, so for this particular situation, if you don't mind, can you send this as a ticket to the help desk and we can kind of talk through that situation? Okay, so after this, I'll follow up on your ticket. Can you re-explain this DFSS reporting? Okay, so for the DFSS reports, DFSS did send out a more detailed email yesterday to delegates, but this is just kind of a summary that the DFSS quarterly reports are going to be due on October 8th, and that's for the Q3 submissions. And DFSS is recommending to all of its delegates to run the quarterly report in HMIS Business Objects today to capture the gender data, just so that you're then able to manually enter that data on the left side of the quarterly report. So in the quarterly report, the right side is usually HMIS data, which is auto-generated, and then on the left side is the manual side where you'll then transfer that data over. Okay, when we run the DFSS quarterly report today, do we submit it next Wednesday? How should we save the file? So again, the reports are due on October 8th. I think the main reason for you generating them today is just to capture the gender data. So you have that available. If you're ready to submit, I would reach out to DFSS and see if it's okay to submit prior to 10/8. But if you need time to correct data or make any adjustments, you still have that time. It's just that you won't have the gender data, potentially won't have the gender data available after 10/1. We should have an article that talks through how to run the quarterly reports, but it's not going to talk about this specific iteration. To clarify, DFS is only for projects and funds. Okay, so yes, this is just for DFSS funded projects. So if you're funded through DFSS, you should have received the email. Again, this is just to collect the gender data. prior to October 1st. If you have reasons to still need to run the report after October 1st, you still can. It's just not going to include the gender data that you need to submit to DFSS. So it's important that you have that information a part of your report. So if you don't have it internally and you're going to rely on HMIS's data to complete that, you're going to need to run that today to have it available. So if you have a report that's good to go today, again, I can't make a determination on how DFSS receives these reports. But if you're ready to submit, I would reach out to DFSS and let them know, and see if it's okay to submit today or tomorrow. Okay, and then the last one here is that I believe our project is IDHS funded. How do we find out? So you should be able to just look at the grant contract from for the project to kind of identify the funding source. But that would kind of be the only way that I can say that you would know for sure. Okay, so we're getting ready to move on to our next slide here, which is going to talk through HMIS training. I'm actually going to pass it over to Rochelle Fajardo, and she's going to talk us through it.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Rochelle Fajardo, and I'm the training coordinator on the HMIS team. Today, I'll be talking about the HMIS training and some upcoming changes that to expect. Oh. Hello, 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 hello. Hello? Okay. Looks like. Great. Sounds like I can be heard now. Hello, everybody, again. My name is Rochelle Fajardo. Again, I'm the training coordinator at the HMIS team. Again, I'm talking about the HMIS training and some upcoming changes and updates that we're expecting to do by the end of this year. So we've been kind of collecting data and analyzing their needs, and one area that we will work on is improving the HMIS training and making it more accessible. And we will do this in the way of creating kind of a train-to-trainer learning path. So our COC is very large, and we are a small team. And I think our goal to combat the scope and the scale that our COC is growing and the number of users are going is just creating a learning path for trainers within organizations. It's the only way we can have access to more support, because we know that HMIS training can be really long and arduous. But since we don't have the capacity to provide full support, I'm hoping to put in more resources into providing more training to supervisors and other trainers that might be at your agency to hopefully provide that more support and more complete training for new users coming in. So it's going to come in the form of like more modular interactive courses. If you have seen like the brand new or updated coordinated entry trainings, that's kind of where we've started launching those kinds of courses. And we're hoping to add more of those kind of interactive courses into the LMS within the main base foundation HMIS courses. For reasons for it's just easier to update those, and hopefully with a lot more time we can expand those, make them more accessible, add more voiceovers, and just create new ways to practice using the system before actually using it, which we recognize there is not enough practice in the training part. And that kind of goes into the expanded content. And the goal is, again, to expand what's already here. We've kind of only provided training for very basic stuff. And again, with the hope of more time with all these updates to the process itself, that we can expand the content. We can put more training around the reporting, more training on how the data really works and how to update it, how to correct it, and all of the needs that we have around data. So the way that we kind of will start launching towards these goals is to first streamline the beginning process in general. So that's kind of where the first updates will happen. So can you get to the next slide, please? So the updates will be to just hopefully consolidating some pieces. So right now, so the first step we go through is the training request. Right now, that requires an ATA to just submit a ticket. It's an email form. It kind of causes some incomplete information, resulting in longer processing time. And then the users receive their account through a registration that they complete in the intro course. So we're going to move towards just one complete training request. So there is going to be an all-inclusive form that people will complete to hopefully standardize the information that we're receiving at one time. And that removes that responsibility on the user that delays the process because some steps were skipped. The next thing that will happen is the LMS courses. So the requirements will stay the same. That they'll still need to complete that intro course, the project-specific course. But now we're hoping to provide kind of a learner progress report. So we want providers to be able to kind of support their users and be able to keep track of where everybody is. And then courses will now have an expiration, and training in general will have an expiration, and it'll be more documented. I know sometimes I try to implement this, but I think the main problem area we've seen is that there is such a long time from request to completion, or which we're trying to lessen because that lowers the knowledge retention, and then it prevents us as a team to really predict how many users are actually in training at one time, because sometimes we'll receive a request in January, maybe they'll complete it in April, and then somehow they don't get access until the next year sometimes. So sometimes these processes for some people can be weeks to months, and we need a better way to be able to keep track of who's getting left in the dust. And then again, that removes kind of the extra responsibility on the user. The supervisors are hopefully able to keep track and support that timely completion, and then we can manage kind of what's happening to our user and then make changes according to that. Before I continue to the next steps, is there any questions so far? I see a question of, will in-person be an option again? In-person is a little tough. It is in the works to talk about doing it again, but in a smaller setting. But we do have like over 1,000 users, and within a year, just too much of a volume. So it's still kind of workshopping that, and that's kind of like the hope is that we find some windows and time to free up to allow more in-person options. I see another question. I think the COC team should do live training once or twice a month for all new users in the system because the self-training is not working. I'm seeing that a lot of the questions are kind of the same. So we do recognize that the self-training, the self-directed training is a little difficult, and part of that is just we don't have complete training. The training is insufficient, but we also need to open up time to update that training, which is kind of where we're trying to go in the direction of for training. Or there's going to be a bit of a transition time to kind of get there. There is a lot of users in the system, and it's a big overhaul, and it's taken kind of several years to even get to a point where like a streamlined process kind of makes sense right now. So we hear you. We're trying to improve the self-pace. It's doing your best. So more will be coming up about the updates in the training. Hopefully the content will improve as we work on the process first. Does that mean that more than one person per agency will access to oversee the progress for new users in training? So yeah, when we provide the learning progress report, I think right now the thought is just it will live in an article. So it will live in an article, so it'll be available for other folks. Why do agencies pay for this training when so much of the actual training falls to our staff? That is not a question I can answer because I don't have an answer for that question, but I will find that answer for you. Is there any question about the process that I have presented rather, because we do recognize all these like issues and we're trying to work towards improving them. All right, so the next step will be the sample client assignment. The next step will be the sample client assignment. We're just gonna make it more simple outside of the proctor. It is a sample client assignment. And the main change that will happen in this process is now that users are going to be signing up for the assignment to be added to a wait list. And only a number of users will be completing this assignment at a time, and there will be time and attempt limits applied. Feedback will be provided using a standardized form. So this form is going to be incredibly detailed and with multiple links and screenshots to resources on how to correct the errors that are in the feedback or in the sample client that was submitted. Because this is to resolve the problem areas of the really long assignment. That process takes a long time, and then it's also an unpredictable user volume. So the same thing that's happening with the LMS courses, where people are taking a long time then, it is kind of overflowing into the proctor, the sample client assignment, and then that's kind of what takes a long time. So I could have a week where I have 10 people submitting me sample clients, and then the next week I'll have 30. So it makes it quite difficult. And then the other piece is that the feedback can be confusing. We recognize that the feedback I'm providing is written, and not everyone understands things that way, which is why we're requesting the live training. However, as I've mentioned, the volume of folks that we're getting through the training, it's quite difficult to, it takes a long time to kind of provide that training. So trying to provide more resources so that all the feedback, the errors can be corrected internally. And then, yes. Okay. And then finally, the last part, after passing the sample client assignment, they will receive their live HMIS access. Looking at some questions again. Is it possible to create a written step-by-step guide for data entry? Again, that's something that we're working on developing. There is some guides in the help desk that provide that step-by-step. That's another piece of this whole plan, is to provide or to kind of encourage people to use the help desk a little bit more. So a lot of, especially new information that we're presenting in the last couple of years, a lot of the LMS and information can be found usually in an article. So we're trying to encourage more people to use the articles because the same information can be there and can be easier to be referenced. So yes, Emma, that is on the docket, and some of them have already been placed in the help desk. Are these processed in the in planning stage or ready to be rolled out? So the process itself is pretty solidified. We have decided that this is what's going to be rolled out. What is still in the planning stage is how the rollout will be. As you can imagine, that this is a pretty big, this is a little more than a minor change in process. So there will definitely be a lot of stuff, documentation that needs to be developed before this gets rolled out, which will be my next slide. Okay, so an expected rollout plan. So September ATA meeting is today. And then we don't really have an expected time this will roll out just yet. Data standards are happening. So there's a lot of things that we still need to pull together. So, but the community will have plenty of time before it actually is implemented. So we're going to go through about a 2-week transition period. We'll announce when it will happen well before it happens. During this time, some live trainings will be provided to ATAs, or a LMS course will be completed. Users at this time that are in the middle of training will have time to complete their training. And then we'll probably have to pause onboarding new users during this time. Implementation estimated early next year. What implementation will look like is that the training site will be refreshed completely. So we've done this before, where they clean out the training site, and this process, once it's in place, we're hoping to do that a little more frequently because it's really important that the training site is up to date. So this will kind of be the start of that. All users that haven't completed the training will need to be requested again, and then ATAs will have some extra time to attend either live trainings or some LMS courses. So there definitely will be a plethora of things, of resources coming up to this implementation to make sure that everyone is ready for it. So examples of what that would look like is there will definitely be at least one or multiple webinars on just how the process will work. There will be several, we'll hold several webinars helping the ATAs kind of go through the sample client, just so we know how to support our users. And yes, so all of that, we will provide more details on what the rollout would look like once we get close, once we pull the actual list up together. All right, so I'm gonna go back to the questions a little bit. Last thing I saw was Emma. So when will this be implemented? Carolyn, we will let you guys know. We are estimating early next year. Isabella, I will reach out to you separately. I did hear about this from someone else and was not able to see it ticket, so I will reach out to you directly after this meeting. Emma, yes, those resources are actually already available. So specifically in the for entry assessments, there is articles for each of them now, and with the data standards changing as well, some new ones will be updated. So I will send that to you. I will find it and send a link to you. Shortly. So that is in the help desk already. Daniel, we would love an article on how to use Report Builder. So Report Builder, there actually is one of those things that WellSky doesn't have a lot of documentation on, which is why we don't have any documentation on it. But that is something in the works that WellSky is working on. So we have to wait for them to provide us with documentation so we can create content on how to use the Report Builder. Will these changes include how we do the recently adjusted HRS training process? So the HRS, the Housing Resource Specialist training process functions very separately. Well, not very separately. Coordinate Entry manages that. The main change for Housing Resource Specialist training is that you will only really directly talk to Coordinate Entry after this has been implemented, but we'll definitely include how Coordinate Entry training will change in the trainings when this gets implemented. So everyone is required to take training again, not complete training. We will require we will require training for ATAs on just this. Eventually, we will require people to do training again once the training actually gets updated. But right now, we will require all ATAs to complete like this training about the training. Isabella, you can email. I will beep you. The articles are still ambiguous about specific terms. Okay, I can follow more in a follow-up email. Emma, I'm happy to hear some thoughts. We can definitely look through and add some more content to that. But I think those are all my steps, all my slides, Alex.
Okay, thank you, Rochelle.
Oh, wait, there's one more question. Can a provider have more than one person? Yes. Yes, more than one ATA can be at an agency. And then also, there could be other people that are training at your agency that is not an ATA, but we're kind of just generalizing as an ATA because that's who we as the HMIS team kind of hold as like the main liaison. So if like internally there is room for other people to train, then great. But yeah, I'm kind of just lumping like ATA as the main like HMIS liaison, but there could be more than one. All right, signing off.
Okay, thanks again, Rochelle. So we're going to now talk through the agency participation agreement. So beginning in November, we'll kick off the annual agency participation agreement renewal process. As required by the Chicago COC, all organizations using HMIS must complete and sign an APA each year to maintain system access. The APA outlines the responsibilities of both your agency and All Chicago as the lead HMIS agency. Since the terms are set by the COC, agreements cannot be modified on an agency by agency basis. So we do want just everybody to kind of put on their radar that communications on the APA process will start going out the week of October 27th, with the APA's plan to be sent out the week of November 17th, with an expected due date of December 12th. One thing that I do want to mention why it's really important is that agencies that do not sign a agency participation agreement by the due date will be at risk of being deactivated in HMIS. So this year we're starting the process early so we can ensure that all APAs are signed on time. Just because we want to make sure that we don't have to at least talk about the possibilities of deactivating your project. Okay, so we do have a quick question. Will the APAs be sent out via DocuSign? We're hyper aware of clicking links and emails at our agency. So yes, they will be sent via DocuSign. Prior to the rollout, we'll kind of review the people that signed last year and ensure that they're on the email list. If you're already aware that the person that signed last year is not going to be the person that signs this year, just please let us know. Send in a ticket to the help desk, just so we can be aware, kind of put it on our list prior to starting to send out communications. So why does the APA matter? It ensures continued access to HMIS. As I mentioned, every agency must have one on file. And it clarifies roles and responsibilities. The APA outlines what is expected of each agency using HMIS, as well as the responsibilities of All Chicago as the lead HMIS agency. It supports data accuracy. Signing the APA affirms your agency's commitment to protecting client data and following HUD and COC data standards. Promotes consistency across the COC. So a standardized agreement just helps ensure all agencies are operating under the same terms, reducing confusion and improving collaboration. Again, this is coming up in the future, so just to put it on everyone's radar. But are there any initial questions about the APA process or anything that happened last year that causes any concern? I'm sorry, Sandra, I missed your question. Can a PDF be sent to ATAs along with the link sent to agency COCs? There is a process of people to review before the CO signs electronically. Okay, so that's kind of good to know of how that works internally for your agency. So let us think about how that can be incorporated this year to help streamline that process. So must the ATA sign the APA, or can other agency representatives do it? So ideally, the APA should only be signed by the executive director or chief operating officer. Someone of a higher position at your agency should be the one signing the agency participation agreement. ATAs will be included on those notifications, as well as those staff members, again, from our previous signatures. But yeah, ideally it's really for the executive directors or higher staff at your agencies. Okay, so I know we're really getting close to time. So one thing I do really want to touch on is that the data and performance team is going to be hosting a webinar tomorrow. It's going to be on the project and performance report. So All Chicago recently released a new process by which agencies and funders can request project performance reports. The All Chicago will hold a webinar to explain this report. This is ideal for ATAs and others who may request and use the reports. The webinar is for tomorrow, October 1st from 2 to 3 p.m. And will be recorded and available through the LMS. There is a registration link here, so you can register for this webinar tomorrow. I am going to try and send out the slides to ATAs right after this meeting so that you can have this available to just click on. But yeah, this is going to be going on tomorrow from 2 to 3. Okay, and the last slide here is just going to be upcoming dates. So again, on October 1st, the data standards will go live in HMIS. So again, tomorrow we'll send out an email to ATAs, actually to all users, just letting them know that either the update went great and there's no issues, or we'll let you know next steps. Again, tomorrow, the data and performance team will be hosting a webinar on the project and performance report, and that's going to be from 2 to 3. From October 1st through the 10th, The HMIS team will be hosting office hours. So if you have any questions or concerns about the new data standards and how it impacts your agency specifically, you can sign up for these office hours and we can kind of talk through any of those concerns. On October 6th, the 2026 Data Standards Follow-Up webinar is going to happen. Again, we're going to talk through the data standards as well as how those should be completed in the system. October 8th is going to be the deadline for the DFSS quarterly reports to be submitted. Again, if you are funded to DFSS, DFSS encourages you to run these quarterly reports today to capture the gender information. And then again on October 17th, actually by September 17th or October 17th, SSVF VA project should have their October submissions uploaded to the VA repository by this date. And that's just to ensure that you don't run into any issues trying to submit your October reports once the system updates to a new fiscal year for the VA exports. Can I drop the link in the chat? So if you just let me know what link you're referring to and I could put it in the chat for you. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened there. Hopefully everyone's still able to see my screen. Yes, I can put the link for tomorrow's webinar in the chat. Just give me just a moment. Thank you, Erica. So this should be the link to the performance webinar tomorrow. Okay, I know we're a little over time, so again, thank you everyone for joining the ATA meeting today. I will stay on for a little bit just to answer any remaining questions. I will try to send the slides as well as the recording and a follow-up via email later today. But again, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll stay on for a few more minutes to answer questions. First question, is there a data quality schedule for 2026? So at this time, we haven't put together a data quality schedule for 2026, but our plan going forward is to kind of preset those dates for the entire year and send them out at one time. So everyone's aware of what the schedule is for the entire year. What contact information do we use for office hours? So right after this, I'll put in the email that I send out the link to office hours. But there is a link and you'll be able to select a specific time, and within it, you'll be able to also include any additional staff members that you want to also join the call. Okay, so the link does not work. Okay, give me just 1 second and let me re-put that in the chat. Okay, so it looks like it's the same link. So let me just figure the link out, and then I can again include it in the email that I send out as a follow-up to this ATA meeting. Okay, it does look like the link is working. Okay, perfect. Okay, so are there any additional questions, either related to the data standards, data quality, participation agreements? Okay, well, it doesn't look like any additional questions are coming in. So again, everyone enjoy your day. Thank you again for joining the ATA meeting, and I will follow back up with the slides and the recording. Thank you.